Welcome back to Champion Select. Champions, it's your boy Shinya. Guys, how we doing? Today we're going to go over a topic that isn't discussed very much, and we're going to talk about how to actually build a Riftbound deck. A lot of people out there simply go on Piltover Over Archive, they look up what the best legend is for their current deck, and then they just run that. So today I'm going to go ahead and go over the basics of deck building, how to build your own unique deck, that way you can catch some people off surprise at your Nexus Night and your skirmishes. And guys, if you're not subbed already, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. I'm starting with a giveaway for hitting 1,000 subscribers. We're giving away 2 Jinx starter decks to 2 lucky subscribers. So make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, as you're not going to want to miss out. The drawing is going to end next week, so make sure you get in on that. Alrighty, so as we get into it, so currently everyone is running basically the same decks and the same variants of all of the same decks. They're running the same units, the same spells, and the same win conditions. And yeah, they work at the end of the day, but if you want to stand out, you want to build something of your own, and you want to catch some people off guard, you're going to want to build your own deck. And we're going to go into all the deck building basics, how to build a deck, what that looks like, and you're going to have something unique, different to bring to your Nexus Nights. Not random, not bad, different, and still is able to get those wins, and they make sure that you're getting your prizing. So today I'm going to show you how to build a strong and unique Riftbound deck from scratch without throwing your games. And by the end of the video, you'll know how to create your own strategy, how to avoid those copy and paste decks, and how to build something that people don't know how to play against. Alrighty, as we get into the deck building process, I always recommend using Piltover Archive. It's the easiest and cleanest way to build your decks. And obviously, every deck's going to start with a legend. Just determine what you want to play, look through the legends, you can right click them, view card details to see exactly what that legend does, and if something fits your playstyle, something that you really want to make work, or maybe there's an unrepresented deck in the meta, maybe there's something that you think you can make work, you could obviously go with it. So for me, I want to build a set deck. I'm going to be bringing set to Atlanta. I'm going to homebrew something new, so we're going to go ahead and click the legend. Piltover Archive does something great where it automatically filters the cards based on the domains of the champion that you're using. Alrighty, and some major things that people get wrong when trying to build these decks. They don't have a clear objective or goal or synergy in mind. That's something you want to keep in mind when you're going out and building your deck is, what is your deck trying to do? What does it excel at? What are its worst matchups and how do I fix it? And what cards can I add to fix it? So starting off, we're going to want to identify some good 2-drops. 2-drops are your bread and butter of the game. If you're playing a best of 3, there will always be a game where you are going first. Obviously, if you lose the dice roll, your opponent is generally going to go first. If you lose that game, you are going to opt to go first on the second game. So you're going to want to have a strong foundation of 2-drops. And not only that, 2-drops you're able to play going second as well. So go on, obviously, again, Piltover Archive. Go to your filters, we're going to go to type, and we're just going to select our units. So we're going to go here and look at our units in orange and yellow, and what we can even do even further, we can go ahead and drop the energy down. Let's look at the 2 to 3 cost units, because obviously you're going to be going second in one of the games at minimum as well. It could be up to 2, could be up to 1, hard to say depending on how you win your dice rolls. From there, we're going to want to identify, okay, what is our deck trying to do? Obviously with set revolves around getting lots of buffs, saving your units with those buffs, that way to keep up some tempo and keep up having those units in play. And it all depends on your local meta as well. So as we sort of getting into looking at the units, one thing that I know in my local meta is Victor is currently a very big presence. It probably is a big presence in your meta as well, considering it's probably one of the best decks in format. So as I'm looking through the cards and as I'm reading them, I'm coming in here and I'm saying, okay, I want something that is going to be able to get around Cold the Weak. Cold the Weak, because I know Victor is going to be playing that a lot. They love playing it on turn 2, after summoning their 1-mana recruit, and they kill your 2 or your 3-drop. So something like Faithful Manufacturer might be a good intro into the deck. It's a 3-mana, so you're always going to be guaranteed to play it going second, and it makes 2 units. So it's little things like that that sort of, as you identify what the meta is in your current scene, or if you're going to be playing for best of cards in Atlanta, Vegas, things like that, it's something you need to consider as well. Alrighty, so let's start trying to build this deck. For set, one of the big bread and butter units, and bread and butter is going to be units that are played in basically every single variation of that deck, is going to be the Pit Rookie. Pit Rookie is an incredibly good card. You play it, you give a buff to another unit. You could play it just as going first on turn 2, opting not to buff something, obviously because it buffs another unit, and you're never mad about that. Riftbound at its core is a game about tempo and playing on your mana curve. And what does your mana curve mean? Mana curve means getting the most value out of your runes every single turn. Back in Origins, that was basically, I'm not going to say an auto win, but an easy way to play the game. Now with Spiritforge and Unleash coming out here shortly, playing on curve and leaving up untapped mana may not necessarily be a bad thing, so I think the meta is going to slow down pretty significantly. Alright, so one of the most important things to keep in mind is you're never really going to want to miss your 2-drop. Riftbound is a game about tempo, and if you miss your 2-drop, you miss that turn 1 play, you're not able to play something immediately to the base, that way you can move in on the next turn, interact with the board, you're going to be in for a hard time, especially now that the meta is pretty quick and tempo is the name of the game. So, when it comes to 2-drops, you're going to want to run anywhere from 6 to 9 2-drops in your deck. I know some people run up to 11 2-drops to make sure that they don't miss that turn 1 play, because missing the turn 1 play is absolutely devastating in the current meta. Alright, so looking a little bit further, as we start getting an idea of what we want to do with our deck, we know Set is very buff oriented. We're looking at 2-drops like Cythria. When you play another unit, buff me, there's going to be a lot of buff interaction, and I think personally, the meta is incredibly fast right now, so having a lot of 2-drops in your deck, being very low to the ground, I think is going to be the best play. So now we've already got 6 2-drops. I personally, again, I like to run anywhere from 7 to 8. As I'm looking through the 2-drops, what else do I want to run? We've identified Sea Monkey. Sea Monkey, you can play it going second on turn 1, having 3 mana, and it comes in with a buff, assuming you play 3. So this is one of the cards that's going to be always good going first, and always good going second, so let's slam 3 of them in there, and we're up to that 9 2-drops. Alrighty, now that I feel that we have our 2-drops covered, we're going to go ahead and look into our little bit more mid-game cards, and when it comes to mid-game, I'm going to consider any of that from anywhere from 3 to 6 energy. I think that's a good idea of what a mid-game deck looks like when it comes to, your cards. So one of the cards that's a very good staple, First Mate. We know First Mate's incredibly good. I personally always auto include 3 of them because, you're going to get bounce around those battlefields with a little bit more synergy that I'll cover here in a few moments. But something to consider, there's really not a ton of other good 3-drops in the game currently. You could run something like Vanguard Captain, again, to get around that Victor meta if they do cold a weak you. Things like that, you want to consider that within your, your local scene. And what I recommend doing if you're really unsure on what to fit into that slot, just go into the specific colors of what exactly you are thinking about building and just read every single card. I know it seems a little daunting considering look at how many cards there are. There is a significant amount of cards. There's 91 cards. When you consider alt arts and things like that, there's probably closer to 70, but there's a lot of cards. But that way you have an idea of what exactly you want to build, what you want to put into your decks, and maybe you might notice something someone else hasn't noticed yet. Riftbound is still extremely in its infancy, guys. Riftbound only came out October 31st of 2025, so we're only like 6 months into the game, very early on. Alright, so we only have 3 3-drops currently. I'm going through the list and I see Lucian. I like the idea of Lucian having that Weapon Master, being able to equip a gear for basically free, and then when he conquers, he readies. I'm going to throw 3 of them in there as well. So we're almost halfway through building our deck already, and we've only got 2 and 3-drops. So unless we have a ideology of being really low to the ground as sort of like a zoo archetype, just flooding the units, flooding the board with units, maybe that's the strategy I want to go down all of a sudden. Maybe I want to be really low to the ground and save my excess mana on those bigger turns for things like spell interactions. So let's get into what that spells look like. So again, we'll go to our filters, we will get rid of our units, and we will look at our spells. So now getting into the spells, you're going to want to do the same thing. There's only 40, so it's a lot less. We're going to want to start looking at specific interactions with the board, with combat, doing combat tricks. One thing we're going to want to immediately look at is our Legends signature spell for Set. His signature spell is Showstopper. I'm going to go ahead and read it. I love this card. I think it's incredible. It's basically an auto-include of 3 of in every single Set deck. One thing I want to point out really quick is if you see a signature spell within the same domain, so obviously we have orange and yellow, which is Fiora, you cannot play this card within your Set deck. This is for the Fiora Legend only. I know a couple players, I've seen locals get mixed up with this. It is a little bit confusing, but obviously we cannot run Riposte, we cannot run Fiora's signature ability spell in our deck. Alright, so as we're looking through the list, there's a couple things that I want to point out that I've noticed about my personal local meta. Currently, I've noticed there's a lot of Victors and a lot of Kai'Sas. And what do Victors and Kai'Sas like to do? They like to cast spells that do damage. So one thing that I looked at is like, oh, Unyielding Spirit. This is going to be something I'm going to want to put in my sideboard. And your sideboard is a set of up to 8 cards that you can side into your deck after game 1, after you've won or lost game 1, between game 2 and between game 3. So that way, if you go up against something that you may, struggle into, you have stuff in your sideboard, that way you can combat it. So for example, for me, I really like to put 2 Unyielding Spirits in my sideboard because I know my meta is very Kaisa and Victor heavy. They love to cast those spells. What else is in is within the current meta in my shops? Salvage. Salvage is incredibly good for gears. There's a lot of Irelias running around. Irelias equals gears. We're going to want to get rid of those gears. So I'm going to go ahead and right click it. I'm going to add 2 into my sideboard. You generally could run 3 of each of your sideboard cards. Obviously, one of them you'd only be run 2 of. But because we only get 8 cards in our sideboard, the way I look at it is I'm going to want to run 2 of each that will help me, 2 of each card that will help me in specific matchups. So for example, Kaisa and Victor, I'm going to run 2 Unyielding Spirits, 2 Salvage, and then I have 2 more slots of 2 cards. That way I can look into what I'm personally struggling with within my local meta, or even what the deck is generally weak against. Alright, so as we're considering spells for our main deck, currently, with looking at this, we have a lot of interaction with getting onto battlefields, right? We have things like Lucian, which will ready when we go into the battlefield. We have Showstopper, which will move a buff a unit and move to the battlefield. So we don't have a lot of what's called a combat trick. And a combat trick is going to be something that when you move into combat, when you move in to fight your opponent's unit, or they move in to fight you, you have something up your sleeve. You keep up runes open. That way you can play something when they push in to, sort of trick them into doing a combat with you. Things like Punch First. Punch First is an incredibly good card. It's an action during that combat or on your turn, giving your unit +5. And it's only 1 mana for 2 orange recycle. That's something that's going to catch a lot of people off guard. One thing to consider though, 2 mana is a lot to recycle. And we've already saw with our set legend ability, when we save a card, when we save a buffed unit, we have to pay a power. So we are looking at a very, very power hungry deck, assuming we put the Punch First in. And that's when things like Seals start to become very, very, very good. So I've identified it. I'm going to put 2 in my main deck. I don't necessarily want to put 3, because I don't want to draw 3 of these in any game. When it comes to how many copies of each you want to put into your decks, you want to figure out, is this a card I want to draw multiple times? Is it a card I'm okay with drawing multiple times? Is it a card I want to see regularly, like those 2 drops? You have to keep that in mind as you're sort of building your deck, and once you are finished, looking at your curve and seeing how low to the ground or how high end you are. Alright, so we got a couple combat tricks, we got battlefield interaction. One thing that I don't have is I don't have anything to interact with my opponent's backline in their base. And that's where things like challenge will come into play, where I target my unit and one of their units, they do combat damage to each other. And if it's my turn, we can pre-buff our units with things like Punch First to give them additional might before doing that challenge. It's a lot of might, but if there's something sticky in the back lines that you really need to get rid of, that's basically the only way in orange to get rid of those. Alrighty, so looking at our deck, we're looking like a pretty standard set list so far. And this is one of the things that I want to really reiterate is you want to build around basically what your locals look like or what matchups you're struggling against. So for me personally, again, I know there's a lot of Victors in the wild. I personally struggle with Victor against my current set deck. That's when you go into looking at these units, these spells, these gears, and you really start identifying what your worst matchups are. And for me, again, Victor is awful. So that's why when I start looking at things like Blood Money, where I know there's a lot of really aggro decks currently in the meta in my local scene. There's a lot of Victors. I'm never really mad about using Blood Money on a Victor recruit token to get that gold. And one of the things, again, which you just talked about, we're spending a lot of power in this deck. So killing units and getting gold for it, like it's basically like a Wages of Pain, is incredibly good. So in this set, and this ideology, I'm going to put 3 in my main board just because I feel like there's a lot of currently crazy cards that are under 2 or less that are getting a lot of value just for pushing in on battlefields and taking them when, they cold a weak your unit and they move up and they take your battlefield with something small. This kills things like Plundering Poro, which we see a lot in blue, Stalwart Poros as well, and Master Yi, and those green decks. Alright, so we're only at 14 more cards to put into our main deck, and there's still a lot we want to put in. So, obviously, one thing that we have identified already, Set is going to be wanting to be doing a lot of buffs because that is going to be the bread and butter of what his legend looks like. So now that we've really narrowed it down, and we only have 14 cards left, cool thing you can do on Piltover, you can come up to the search bar, you can type buff, and this will give you every single card within your colors, obviously, that mentions the word buff. So there's 32 cards. We've already identified, we've only got Cytheria, Pit Rookie, and Sea Monkey, and obviously our showstoppers, giving us buffs, and maybe we want to identify a couple more cards to get buffs going. That way we can actually start using that set legend ability. Alright, so as we're looking through the cards, we've identified what's really popular in our local meta, and we know people like to cast a lot of spells, and I know there's a lot of gears like Irelia. So we're going to identify things like Sabotage, where you're going to look at your opponent's hand and choose a non-unit card from it and recycle it. Now, depending on how popular the decks that, really have those like combo pieces are, this may be a sideboard card. Really hard to say, but for the sake of consistency and for the sake of argument, we're just going to put 2 in our sideboard, as we've already identified those 15 Kaises are being very good with the Unyielding Spirit, the Irelias and such not being, a good counter for salvage. We're going to add 2 of these to our sideboard. Now we've got 2 cards in our sideboard left. Alright, so the next thing we're going to think about is removal of things like big units and card draw. So those are going to be 2 things we want to keep in mind for those like Dazzling Aurora decks, right? So this current deck, obviously being super low to the ground, we could be pretty decent into those like aggro decks, right? But now we're going to be looking at things like Aurora decks. Maybe Aurora decks are going to give us some hard time. Or we're going to run out of steam by not drawing enough cards. And as we look through the cards, we look at things like Hidden Blade. Kills a unit at a battlefield, its controller draws 2. Sounds like a very good synergistic card, right? Because we can kill any unit. We can kill our units as well. And with our set legend ability, we can save them. So we're starting to see some synergy come into play. So if we wanted to kill our own unit, we would draw 2 cards, we would save our unit, and that way that's a little bit more card draw that we look for that we currently don't have. Because looking at our list, once we've played our cards and we play our card for every turn, we're out of gas. We don't have any more card draw, and it's a very important thing to keep in mind as you sort of go through the motions is, am I running out of cards? What can I do to draw more cards? So that's when things like battlefields and things like those spells, like draw cards, come into play. And as we're considering synergy, we looked at the buff cards. We see things something like Call to Glory. It's another combat trick. You could spend a buff to make this free or pay 3 for it. We have a lot of buffs within our current deck. We have our Cytherias, we have our Pit Rookies, we have our Showstoppers. This is probably a card we're going to want to run 3 of. And now at this point, we're pretty good on spells. We're pretty good on early game units. Now what do we want to do? We only have 8 cards left to put into our deck. So remember earlier when we added Lucian to our deck? Remember, Lucian has something called Weapon Master, which allows him to pay a power less to equip a gear that's currently on the field. So we want to have a little bit of synergy with that as well, but we also want to have something that has synergy with our current legend, which is set. We want to get buffs. We don't want to save them. We go through, we filter it by gear. We're going to go ahead and type in buff. And would you look at that? There is a couple of cards that do get buffs. One of the ones that I know off the top of my head that for some reason doesn't show, Warmog's Armor. It's only a 1 cost. It casts an orange it takes an orange to equip, and it gives +1. So 1 for 1, pretty good so far. But when you conquer Buff Me, perfect for our synergy, perfect for our game plan. We're probably going to want to run 3 of those. All right, so now we only have 5 cards left, and we still have to put in our champion. The one thing that I want to do, obviously we're very low to the ground. I want a few cards at the end to really seal out the game. So I want to look at cards that are going to be cards that I don't want to run a ton of, but I obviously want for late game. That way I don't get completely blown out of the water, and I don't have anything to fight those late game decks. So first and foremost, I know which set I'm going to run for my champion. I'm running orange set. We can come in here, we can right click it, we set it as our chosen champion, and again, we now only have 4 cards left. When it comes to the chosen champion, generally a lot of decks don't want to run more than 1 of the chosen champion within their deck, because you're always going to have that champion to play from your champion zone. That's something to keep in mind. We will always have a 5 cost drop to play. So if you're going second, on that second turn, I know for sure I always have a play to drop that unit. Alright, so as we're talking about, we're going to want to have some cards that can really seal out that late game. We've identified our local metas, we know what we're currently struggling against, And now, as I'm reading through the cards, we look at things like something like a Rune Runner. I can't be chosen by spells and abilities. We mentioned that there is a lot of spells that is currently being cast in my local meta. It's a 6 cost for 5, and it can't be chosen by spells or abilities. Sign me up, I'm going to run 2 of them. I don't necessarily want to run 3 of them, because I don't want my hand to be clogged with these cards. Something else to keep in mind too, as you're looking at your late game cards, we've already identified Set is going to be very power hungry, so we're going to be paying a lot of runes to send back for things like our Showstoppers, our Punch First, our equipping our Warmogs, and for our Set Legend ability. So we're going to be taking a lot of power. So one thing to keep in mind, there might not even be an opportunity that we will even get above 6 runes. So that's some things you want to keep in mind, is how many runes, how many average runes you think you're going to have throughout the entirety of your match. And for me, looking at this list, with these things like Hidden Blades, we're spending a lot of runes. We don't have a lot of card draw. It depends, you know, what do we want to do from here? So for me, I don't think we put in anything more than 6 at the moment. If we didn't have these things like Punch First, these Warmogs to equip, the challenges, the Hidden Blades, maybe we can go a little bit higher with our cost, but in not a lot of worlds are we going to see more than 6 runes at a time. Probably at not any more than 7 to 8 at any given time if we're going to be using that Set Legend ability to save our stuff. And it's small nuances like that that is so incredibly important when you're building your deck. So as we identify that, I'm going to throw in something called a Fey Dragon. It's not something that a lot of people play, but playing cards that aren't necessarily really played a lot is going to throw your opponent off. If you come into a Nexus Knight or a Skirmish and you pull out a deck that they necessarily haven't seen before, I play Set a lot. I pull up to Skirmishes and Nexus Knights a lot with Set. People underestimate how decent Set is. He's not crazy good, but he is a very solid champion, and nobody knows how to play against it, so it could be some free wins pulling up with decks that not necessarily they don't know about, or even cards they don't know how to play around. And with that in mind, for our last card, I'm going to go ahead and add 1 copy of Yone, just for a little bit of spice, being able to hit that backline stuff when I conquer an open battlefield. We already have our things like Warmog's armor to put on him. There's even an argument for maybe putting in a couple more gears, maybe re-identifying the list, and now that we have 4 cards with Weapon Master, maybe we want to tweak our list a little bit. And that's something crazy that I love about this game, is you are constantly going to be tweaking your list until you play probably like 100 games. That sounds like a lot, but you're going to be tweaking your list a lot as you sort of get a feel for how the deck plays, what it struggles against, and just general like knowledge of it. Alrighty, and now we got to pick our battlefields. Probably one of the most important things within deck building. So, jumping into the battlefields, there's a lot of battlefields. There's currently 39 battlefields, and 3 of them are banned, so there's not even really that much to choose from at the moment when you really break down the brass tacks of what really synergizes with your decks. So, looking at our deck, one of the things that immediately stands out, obviously, buffs. We want buff synergy. So, Monastery of Harada is the premier buff synergy card. Not a lot of other decks are running buffs, so this could be a battlefield that your opponent is not going to get a lot of value off of. Not a lot of decks will be able to buff their cards, so Monastery of Harada is going to be a battlefield that basically we can only use. And we talked about it earlier, card draw. We don't have a lot of card draw, so we want to look for battlefields that are going to give us cards. And again, we can filter by draw. We went into the battlefield section, we typed in draw, and now we see battlefields that give us card draw depending on what we do. And one of the other ones we look at here, we obviously can't run Dreamy Tree. We look at Sunken Temple. When you conquer here with 1 or more units that are mighty, which is 5 or more, you could pay 1 to draw 1. And going back in our list and looking at it, we really don't have a lot of cards that can be mighty. Obviously, with things like Punch First, if you use it, they do become mighty. If, say, for example, Lucian is a 3 might unit with a Warmogs, he goes up to 4, he has a buff at 5. So we don't have a ton of cards that will give us card draw. And then from there, you just have to weigh, is it worth potentially running a battlefield that may not necessarily be 100% synergistic, just to, again, go give us something that, we lack. We lack card draw. Do we want to play that battlefield that, gives us card draw, but is only good maybe 60 to 70% of the time? Hard to say. It really just depends on what your meta looks like, how you as a person feel like playing, and just, your general luck. As you're picking your battlefields as well, you're going to want to pick your battlefields with the thought process of when you are going to play them as well. So if you're playing a best of 3, when you are going to that best of 3, you don't know if you're going first or second. So you're going to want to pick what's called a neutral battlefield, something that you don't care to play if you're going first or second. Then you're going to want to put in a battlefield that is very good for you, that is for going first. Something that you want to get on the board early and you want to establish that board presence. And then your third option is going to be that battlefield that when you're going second. Because if you play a best of 3, the first one is going to be neutral. You don't know if you're going first or second. Let's say you go first. You win the game. The second game, you're going to be going second. Basically, no matter what, most decks do want to go first. And then from there, you're going to be going first again because you won, lost, won, and your opponent will always have choice if they're going first or second after a loss. So, Monastery is the best neutral battlefield for buff decks. Sunken Temple is one that you're not afraid of putting down when you're going second, because when you're going second, you have more runes, you have more of an opportunity for your units to be mighty, and there's less of an opportunity for your opponent's units to be mighty because they have less runes going into those battlefields. So maybe that's a good going second battlefield, just things you need to think about. So now, we've identified neutral, we've identified going second. We want to identify one that is going first, that is going to synergize for our deck. We've already identified that our deck is very low to the ground. It's very sort of aggro-oriented. So we need to identify a battlefield for going first. Something like Arena's Greatest could be good. Something that we want to flood the board, just get as many units out as possible, and really force our opponent to make inefficient trades. That way, we can run away with the game. We can get value off of playing our units. We're never going to have more than 7 to 8 runes as it is. Maybe we just want to be really low to the ground, be really aggressive, and just start getting those points early, force our opponent to make those inefficient trades. And then, once you've got your deck, I know we're still missing 2 sideboards. Let's go ahead and save our deck. Shinya's Test Set. We'll save it. We'll be able to get it looking nice and pretty here in the link. And then what I like to do personally is sit down and really take it all in. Our average energy is 2.5. Our average power is 0.4. So we don't have a ton of power, but it's a little bit on the higher end. We could see our curve here. We talked about curve a little bit earlier. Your curve is so incredibly important. You want to hit those 2 drops going first. You want to hit those 3 drops or 2 drops going second. And then turn 2, turn 3, when you have 4 or 5 runes, you want to make sure that you're able to drop, your 4 drops, things like that. And so obviously our deck currently doesn't have any 4 drops. Do we want to have 2 drops going second? Do we really want to flood the board? What does that look like? Obviously, we don't have much late game. We might want to determine, okay, we'll play some test games. We'll see how it feels. We'll see how our sort of aggro strategy feels. And then from there, we can start making adjustments to our deck. One thing that I really love about Piltover Archive is test hands. So right here in the top right, you click hands. You can draw an opening hand just to see what your opening hand would look like, just to get a feel for sort of what the combos will look like. It takes a lot of games to really start identifying what do you want to keep in your opening hand. Keeping things in your opening hand or mulliganing is probably one of the most important decisions you will make in your game. So I recommend just doing this a few dozen times. I'm going to mulligan my 2 cards. Oh, would you look at that? We drew a little bit different. Draw our next card for going, obviously our turn 1. Are we happy with that? Is that like a good hand we will be okay with going first or second? And then just keep doing it. I would recommend doing this probably 50 to 60 times. Just seeing exactly what you think would be a good opening hand, what your sort of synergies look like, what your combos look like. And then the most important thing of testing your deck is getting some games in on it. So if you have a new deck you want to test, you don't want to build it in real life, what you can do is you can go to export. We're going to copy our text list. It copies it in plain text. We're going to go to play.riftatlas.com, import our deck. Obviously, new deck first. We're going to import our deck. We paste our deck. It drops everything here. Import. Save it. Try it out. And then from there, just jam some games. I know a lot of people don't like playing with randoms online, but just being able to test your deck before you go out and build it, before you spend money on it, just sitting down and really getting some reps in on the deck is so incredibly important. And then again, from there, you can identify the weaknesses in the deck. Once you've played the deck 5 to 6 times, you will start seeing patterns. Oh, maybe that 2-drop strategy really isn't good. Maybe I need to cut some of my 2-drops because I'm drawing too many of them. Maybe I need to add some more later game cards because I'm running into a lot of late game cards and things that I'm just not able to beat. Maybe I need more combat tricks. Maybe my battlefields aren't right. Maybe this legend just isn't for me. And then from there, you just play an entirely new deck. It's completely free to come out and test these decks and play them online. And then from there, you're just going to track the games. What feels bad? What cards do you never use? What is winning you your games? Maybe there's a completely new thing that you want to do within your deck that you've identified a different win condition. And then from there, you go back to the lab, remove the dead cards that you aren't playing, change some of the cards up for consistency's sake, and then just double down on what works. If you see that aggro strategy is working, that really low to the ground, flood the board with units and save them with your Set Legend ability. Start conquering and holding every turn. If you think that works and you feel that's working for you, double down on it. Remove those higher end cards and start doing more aggro focused things. So when it comes right down to it, guys, if you copy decks, you might win some games. But if you build your own, you're going to learn the game faster, understand matchups better, understand some cards that maybe not necessarily be meta, or you just don't necessarily know how to play against. You're going to know how to play against them. And the most important thing, you become unpredictable, which is so incredibly important in the current meta, as everyone is just going online and copying what the best decks are. And for me personally, as someone who is a set enjoyer, unpredictable players win more than perfect decks. So if you've been copying decks until now, try this, build something unique, test it, refine it, and let me know down in the comments below what some cards and maybe some decks that you feel are pretty unrepresented and that you think are going to be a little bit better than people say they are online. And if you want more Riftbound tips and tricks, guys, make sure you drop that subscribe button. We're going to be giving away 2 Jinx starter decks next week. You're not going to want to miss it for some free cards, and I smell signature in those Origins packs. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.